All right, welcome to the next in our book chat series. Today we have Nancy Organ with her new book, Data Visualization for People of All Ages. Woohoo, physical, actual
Yeah.
books. How does it feel to have it in your hand?
Ah, delightfully heavy. Yeah. Yes. No, great. Great. I mean, I think that's a difficult feeling to encapsulate in language, ironically, given that it's a book. But yeah, it feels good and nerve-wracking. And simultaneously, I want to look at all of it over and over, and then I don't ever want to see it again. Yeah.
Yep, that
Yep.
that simultaneous mix of feelings, that's definitely a
Yeah,
thing.
yeah. I
Yes.
can speak about that because you finish writing a book and you tell yourself, I will never write another one again. But as soon as you see it published, your brain starts playing tricks on you and you already start getting
Totally.
new ideas.
Totally.
Yeah,
You wake up in the night and you're like, ooh, but what
this could
if?
be a book too.
Or someone asks for something, right? They say, oh, that was, hopefully they're like, oh, that was great. What if you also did? And you're like, oh, no, 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 don't tell me this, don't tell me this. But
So
no, that's great.
maybe we can begin with that by you're talking a little bit
Mm.
about your how you came up with this idea, why you decided to write about this topic again, visualization for all ages, talking a little bit about the writing
Totally.
process, how you discipline yourself, what routine you created, things like that.
Oh, yes, yes, yes. Well, I'll start with the first part of that question. So I think, I think it's rare, but very true in this case, that it genuinely was kind of a lightning bolt moment of like, oh, I have this idea. It was during the pandemic. I had taken a step back from full-time work to just cherish being alive, right? And it's amazing what happens when you have a little bit of space to get new ideas. And so I was rested. I had just taught part-time at the University of Washington. I had a little bit of space and just air to think about and reflect on what I had done in my career thus far. So I was just cleaning my living room and had this kind of, yeah, this lightning bolt moment of like, oh, wait, if I have spent all of this time up until now teaching these incredibly smart grown-ups and adults at Microsoft and the University of Washington and, all these really fully formed people, the fundamentals of a tool and a language that they use daily to talk about their work, to do their work, to interact with their peers. If they, for whatever reason, which we can get into, kind of missed the part of formally learning what they're doing, that's a problem. Like, it would be great if they would feel a little bit more empowered with knowledge to do what they're already doing. But B, and principally, who's teaching their kids? And so I Googled it, and it turned out very few people were teaching their kids. There are some, works starting to emerge. Very fortunately, I think more and more, I think we're in a little bit of a trend in the data viz community of realizing this. I don't, by any means, was not the only one to think of this. So combining all those thoughts was like, well, if I'm teaching the grown-ups and no one's teaching their kids, and I'll make a really bold assumption that I think applies to most people outside of our data viz world, the bold assumption being that most people will never read more than one data viz book, if any. Can I write the one that if they do happen upon it, it applies to everyone in their household? And so that was kind of the starting point. And really within maybe 10 minutes of that idea, I don't know that my living room was any cleaner, but I do know that I had an outline. And I was like, oh, I think this could hold. And so I just Googled how do you write a publishing pitch for a textbook? And I took all the articles that I found and I made a master list of all of the elements that go into a pitch so that I was covering every base. And then I spent a few weeks just satisfying all of those until I had the pitch ready, a few chapters, and then started sending it around. And luckily, I only sent it around maybe 3 places. And Elliot from Routledge said yes. So it all happened really quickly. I mean, it was a couple months from the lightning bolts to, oh no, now I've committed to this. Right.
Now I need to create
Yeah.
the actual thing.
Right.
Right. Now we need to get past chapter 3 and, interrogate and scrutinize all the things that I think I know as a professional, that, oh, actually, I haven't really thought through this carefully enough to explain it in terms that literally everyone, which is an outrageous assumption to make, could understand. But yeah, so that's the origin story.
And then what about the training montage? How did the process of writing work for you? How did you go
Right.
from, okay, I got a contract to here's all the files, have at it?
Totally. Well, as you both, I'm sure, have experienced, it's not a linear process. And one of the most valuable things that either of you told me for this entire process was something Tamara said. She said, Nancy, I don't know how far along we were, maybe a year into it. There's the first 90% and the second 90%. We've done the first 90%. Brace yourself. I don't think you said that specifically, but like, be realistic about that. And that was, I think, a turning point in the process that ended up working for me the best. I think in the early days, I think kind of linearly, and I needed to write start to finish. I prefer to iterate than stay too long on one part. So I just started literally with the introduction and wrote through to the very end, an intentionally very rough draft. I like something, I'm kind of kinesthetic. I need something that I can squish around and cut and throw away and throw together. So I needed to put that raw material out. And I think that was the first 90% of like really thinking, what all could this possibly extend to? But then the second 90%, I think that was almost where the real work starts. Because then you're faced with what you do have. And that's where it's more of the endurance part of it, because you don't have novelty anymore. You have just working with what you've got, and you've got to face yourself that you did this, right? And you get stuck anywhere. There's no one really to point to. But I think just kind of mechanistically, if there are any aspiring authors or people that are stuck, the only secret is incredibly dull, which is just persistence and patience. A little bit every day, and plan what I'm doing the next day before I close my laptop at the end of the day. Just keep trucking. It's going to take the time it will take. Only, a higher power knows what that actual quantity is. So hang in there and keep showing up. And eventually that turned into something where I could sit back, and he actually cried because I was just confused. I sat back and was like, oh, I think I'm done. And I didn't know what to do at that moment, but that did actually materialize. Yeah.
I think that the book reflects the sort of like the linear fashion in which you wrote it, and it has a very clear structure. Every chapter builds sort of like on it's a structure around the concepts of encoding and channels, and you have one chapter per channel, providing in terms of examples, and it's noticeable that there is an underlying structure behind the book. So besides writing it linearly, does the structure of the book also reflect the way that you taught courses around these topics before writing the book?
It doesn't, which is part of why I wrote it that way, because I'm thinking about how I had taught before, either formally or just to coworkers and peers. I think, well, trying to reach a different audience presented different challenges, right? I needed to have no assumptions about what the reader would know. So I needed to start with the most atomic unit, like what even is a data point, right? Which maybe you can assume some working knowledge in some audiences, but not for 10-year-olds, right? I mean, to answer your question more directly, the linear flow of it was really a response to my kind of, maybe you could call it fear or just an expectation that holding people's attention is really, really difficult. And because I didn't have any collateral to hold against them, right? I didn't have a grade to give them to keep them kind of in the game until we could build up, a foundation to pay off later. It really had to pay off immediately, as often as possible. So I tried to, that's what the linear structure did. That if you started at the beginning, it didn't matter how far you got, everything should hopefully be self-contained and self-consistent to that point. You have something to work with that doesn't have any real missing parts. I'd say the only exception there is the very last chapter, which we added at the last minute, and was the fastest to write, I think, because we'd all mulled over the entire thing for so long. They just needed a bow at the end.
Yeah, the wrapping up chapter.
To
It's
recite.
literally called wrapping
Yeah.
up.
It literally needed to wrap up, and the icon at the end is a present, with the bow on top. But I'll afford myself that exception that the end conclusion can stand
There's
alone.
one thing you did in your book which is interestingly different than other books we've had in the series, which I really liked. You have this meet the class part where you have these personas where they have backstories, right? You find out their favorite pets. You see what they look like. And what I liked about this sort of personalizing and humanizing it is, I mean, I think it speaks to a bunch of your goals, and one of them was this idea of, people being able to see themselves, kids from a variety of background, ages, interests, and so on. But it gave you a through line for examples where you could actually allude to these people's personal interests in the data sets that they visualized. And I thought that worked really well.
Yes, thank you. I'm glad you like it. It was, I think, one of the most fun parts to write, and also one of the most nerve-wracking parts, because I wanted to, it's hard to try to represent everybody, right? And I wanted to make sure everybody felt cool. And since I was trying to create, a set of people that hopefully our readers would be able to relate to, I was like, oh, I hope I don't miss anybody or make anybody feel excluded. So that part was a little nerve-wracking, but it was just delightful. And I actually became so attached to all these little characters throughout the book, that in these examples, exactly, just, oh, who in this class would go to ice cream and get that extra scoop of their favorite flavor, or who would do unexpectedly well in the long jump competition, because they're an athlete.
Yeah, would it be Arnold? Would it be Jean-Luc? Would it be Veronica?
Right, exactly.
Would it be Usman? What about Alex?
Exactly.
Yeah, I ended up getting quite invested in these characters as well.
And I did go back and check, to make sure they made sense with it themselves.
Yeah.
But one thing that also
and
did,
non-binary, and you have different ethnicities, and you have different interests, like some are interested in sports and some are interested in computer science, and some are interested in fashion. And I liked the way you tied a breadth of interests in the world to questions that DataViz could help answer. So I thought that was very deftly done.
Okay. Nice. Thank you. I hope also that there could be some kind of resistance, either just, culturally, or, because we haven't learned about it yet, to technical subjects, right? That, oh, maybe I'm not the right person for this. I'm not good at math, or I'm not going to be good at this because I'm a science person or an art person, or however. And so part of this was also just saying, no, this really is like, it's for all ages, but it's also just for all types of people. Visualization is a very human practice
endeavor,
right?
Yeah.
I always say, I tell people at work, or my students, DataViz is for people by people. There are other ways for entities to communicate information to themselves, right? The transfer of information, it can happen in a variety of ways, right? We all have cables, like too many cables, in our houses. Those do that, right? So data visualization specifically is something that we've created for ourselves, and we've formalized for ourselves because we are good at it and it works for us and we like it. And I'm like, is there anything more welcoming than that?
And that actually connects to the following question that I had, which has to do with how you would like the book to be used.
Oh, yes.
I mean, is a 10-year-old really going to read a book like this, or is the reading going to happen in a different environment? Is it going to be sort of like a share experience? So what are your thoughts about that?
I think I would like it to be used as much and however as it can be. Right. Realistically, is a 10-year-old going to sit down and read a textbook? Maybe not. But also maybe, I don't want to make assumptions about what somebody is interested in and what they're ready for or what they want to challenge themselves with. And there may be a 10-year-old that does want to sit down with it and read it themselves. I know of at least one because of my user testing. So that can happen, which is part of the reason, for example, that I put the answers to the exercises at the end, so that if someone did want to just spend their own time with it, they could, and it could be a complete system for them to access. But maybe on a larger scale, sure, perhaps we'll capture more 10-year-olds' attention in a classroom when they have someone guiding them and they have peers that they're working with, or they're sitting with their parents and they're all learning together. So I don't think there is a right way to use this, right? I didn't write it thinking, okay, this is really only for classroom settings, or this is a bedtime story. Here's the information that we wanted to share. You can use it on your own, whoever you are, but it also has the resources for teachers. Goodness knows they are resource constrained enough for time and everything else, that someone, a teacher could pick this up and use it in their classroom and have what they need to present. So they shouldn't need much outside of what's in here, I think, to run an effective module or course.
And that brings up another question, which is, you mentioned user testing. So what was your process like with that? What kids, teachers, grown-ups, professionals in Viz, who all did you talk to?
All of those groups. I just found it through my own networks, some on LinkedIn, some colleagues, some just friends that had kids, or friends who were teachers or knew a teacher. So I made a survey. I sent the book out in electronic draft form, maybe 75% of the way through, and just said, let me know what you think. I made a survey so people could give some ideas. And I think it was really telling that across demographics, I got so many responses back of truly helpful feedback. So I think the most important feedback is, do people actually read it? Right? Do they look at it?
Right.
And sending a textbook to, say, a young family over summer break, I didn't have high hopes that I would get very much back, but I did. Actually, the classroom idea was one of those that kind of got reinforced. Like, yeah, this is working. This helped me connect with what was in the book. So I tried to reach a very broad range of users, both in terms of age, but also for adults, kind of career paths. So not only technical folks, but design folks and project managers, and a range. So we did user test. I think maybe if I were to do it again, I don't think you can overuse it. Maybe you can overuse their test. You could probably over respond to user testing, but I think that it was very productive and useful to hear what people had to say. So I think I would do more were I to do it again.
Can you think of a few big things that changed in response to what you heard back from test readers?
The final chapter,
it's all a blur.
I think. I know it is a little bit of a blur. I believe that we added in the final chapter in part because of that it was just kind of this, like, I think there's just something missing.
Right.
Even small things, a bunch of typo catches that we just wouldn't have seen, but maybe even little things that I think would change the meaning. A couple kind of just highlighted, like, I have no idea what you're saying here. Sections that I think could only come from someone further away than we three were, because we knew what we meant. But yeah, that's a good question. I would need to look back at my notes and figure out what did change. But I just distinctly remember the process, right? There was a couple-week period where I had this big spreadsheet from the Google survey of feedback that I was just picking through to address.
And what has been the response since the book was published? Have you received some emails or reviews, things like that?
No, quiet yet in a way. You two can also probably relate to this. Publishing is such a funny world, right? You just labor over something for years, and then it goes live, and then it's kind of quiet, right? You don't necessarily have as much access to your immediate numbers as you do on something like social media, where you just get likes instantly. So I've heard at least from the publishing end, that it's doing very well, that we are apparently selling more hardcover copies than expected. Our ratio there is unusual. So I think I take that to mean that
That might be
people
because of
are
schools.
or people are just kind of splurging a little on the robust copy, either because they know who will be using it and that they might be a little hard on it, which is great, or because they just wanted the, you know, the solid version for enduring use. But lots of positive feedback from, of course, all my relatives instantly bought it and they've been glowing, but that was not surprising. A few really meaningful, you know, LinkedIn messages, just I got this was wonderful. So yeah, it's been quiet so far, like quiet in the sense of like low amplitude, but relatively high frequency.
Most readers will never send you comments and you will not get to see them, but
Yeah.
certainly, I mean, the vibe that you're getting, I mean, that fact that more
Yeah.
hardcovers are being sold than expected, that's a very good sign. That's a very good sign
Nice.
that the book is being adopted,
Yeah.
as Tamara was saying, in schools. And that makes
Oh,
me
good.
that makes me happy, because this, I think that is a great resource to teach young students. It's so well structured, and not necessarily to be read by students themselves, but for an instructor to pick this up and actually
Yeah.
use it as sort of like as the lesson plan in a math class, for example,
Totally.
to teach all these skills.
Totally. I have actually some of my favorite comments have been the ones where the readers were just surprised. The kind of the sentiment of like, I didn't know how much I needed this, and I really need it, and also we all really need this. It's just like it's so humbling, you know, like, wow, it's just so great to hear that we found an unfulfilled niche, and we did something kind of brazen, and it worked. And the people's response to it, that they don't have to say it, it would have been much easier, and I wouldn't have noticed had they said something simpler and polite, that they're really going out of their way to be like, wait a second, can we make this a requirement, right? Like nationally? So those, I'm trying not to let it kind of overwhelm me with the feeling of like responsibility, you know, but it is exciting.
And I think for me, one of the things that was exciting is how much you managed to get a lot of what most people would think of as pretty adult, sophisticated ideas and nuance
Yeah.
into a book that does not have preconditions, that is absolutely accessible to kids. So,
Yeah.
this is not just like, here's a bar chart, here's a scatter plot, declare victory, kids. It's you got
Yes.
into color and accessibility. You even talk about physicalization and sonification. You
Yeah.
talk about all kinds
Networks.
of nuance.
I
There's,
mean,
Sankey diagrams and tree diagrams. Like there's
the
a
grammar
lot
of
in
it's the
there.
grammar of graphics for children.
Yeah.
It's
You
the
you you
grammar of
got
graphics for
you
children.
have a
Yeah.
big chunk of the grammar of graphics in there, and
Yeah.
and titles and labels, and like I think about my grad class curriculum, and then I think about some of the subjects you've covered, and I'm like, you covered a lot of territory here. It's cool.
I mean, there's a reason it is twice as long and took twice as long as it was contracted for,
They say
right?
we
So,
all.
but who's surprised, right? It's like when you renovate your house, I always tell people it's going to cost 3 times as much and take 3 times as long. So I think we're in a safe margin. But yeah, I think that was part of the fuel for me, for the whole writing process, of that I knew we were doing something that most people were really skeptical we could do. I had 2 years to tell people. Everyone, you're writing a book, right? It's kind of all you can think about. So, it comes up in every single interaction you have. And, I've seen the kind of the look of doubt sweep across the face, like, oh, I'm doing something for everybody. Like, oh, good luck. But so yeah, it was kind of exciting, I think, to be a little bit stubborn and defiant, and just try it and say, okay, well, I think we did. And I thank you too also, because I know as editors, right, you are putting your names on something and you're investing a high non-zero amount of time shepherding this work, especially for a first-time author. It's a wild card. So if a wild card person comes to you and has a pretty goofy idea, that's bold of you to
Most of our authors
to
are first-time
support.
authors. That in
Yeah,
fact, most of you are first-time authors. If the idea were not bold in some way, we'd be so bored we'd say no. So
sure,
we
sure,
like
sure.
bold. We like first-time
Yes,
authors. We like the
yes,
process of shepherding books. That's the
yeah,
fun part. You know, like of
yes.
all the things I do for my job, the part where I get to like read through a book draft and be like, I think this little part could be better if you did it this way. And oh, let's have a nuanced discussion about how you talk about that. Like that's the fun
Totally.
part.
Actually, no, I'm so curious
Like catnip.
for you both, right? Like, what is it? What what's it like on the other side, right? Because you've been on both ends, right?
I mean,
You've created your own masterpieces, and you've also felt you've had the feeling of hitting send and knowing that your past 4 months were just going to be under someone's pen. So what is that like for you? What do you think you? Yeah, I'll leave it at that. I'll be less specific.
in my, I mean, in my case, it's I see it as part of sort of like my, first of all, my love for books because I love reading and I love
Mhm.
writing. But I essentially see the craft of editing books as complementary to the
Mhm.
writing part. So the writing part obviously has its own rewards. But I usually joke that I enjoy editing simply because now I can work with people who will write the books that I would like to read, and I don't need to do
Mm.
it I don't need to do it myself. Somebody else will do it. But then
Yeah.
I will be able to have a small influence in the way that those things are done. And I also see it as part of sort of like an effort to somehow give back. Because I had people advising me years ago on book
Yeah.
writing, for example. And I would like to do essentially to contribute to sort of, I
Yeah.
see these sort of like these chain of being in the world of visualization, right? Who came before can coach people who come after. So you can, again, safely retire because you know that the world of visualization will be in great hands for another generation to come. That's the way that I see it. What about you, Tamara?
Um, I mean, I definitely agree that writing and editing are different, and obviously there's a relationship between them. But I think the nice, I think if I were only editing, it would be a different world. Whereas I try very hard to separate out this is how I wrote my book or might write some other future thing of what I'm doing as a writer from I see what you're trying to do as a writer. And so I, as editor, am helping you shape your voice and differentiate your thing from what's around, which includes some of my things and many other people's things. So you're really wearing this different hat of, and it's sort of, like advising grad students. You're not trying to clone yourself. You're trying to help them be what they can be and accelerate their path and, get people launched out into the world with their own vision. So I actually see editing books a lot like advising grad students with thesis work is and I mean, it's different because we typically co-author papers together in the kind of work I do in a computer science department. So we do joint projects together with them in the lead, whereas this is much less my thing and much more me helping. So, and yeah, there's giving back and there's I mean, this idea that there can be many, many books out there. And, often people come and they're like, well, are there already enough books in X? And it's almost always the answer is, ah, but yours is X prime as opposed to X double prime or Q or Y or K. And almost always when somebody comes to us, there's some way in which they want to do a thing that hasn't been done. Because if it had already been done, they probably wouldn't even been bothering to think about it. So there are there is a place in the world for many books. And, one thing I find interesting about books is they are a forced linearization of thought. And that's exactly, I mean, yes, you can read books in any order. And yes, people do read books, and especially textbooks, they often use them in different orders than the author intended. But if they pick it up and they read it and they get to the end, that's linear. And your choice of expositional order, for me, that's the crux of book writing is, not just what do you put in, but in what order do you explain it?
it's like an album. It's like you need to,
Yeah.
it's not just
And
songs put in a
people
box.
can use shuffle, but
Yeah, but if
you're
you listen
rewarded by
to,
the album.
totally.
And
But
for you, how
I like to listen start to end on my
yeah.
albums. Pretty much all, I mean, there's always the few bops that you go back to on their own. But I think this also has given me a new appreciation for works like books and albums and things that are kind of um, that are sets of material. I have a much more refined appreciation for, and also all my textbooks. I've gone back through all of them and just kind of admired and very kind of like quietly apologized to the authors of my college textbooks. Like, I didn't appreciate you. So I hope that karma gets back out into the world and they know that I see you now.
So it sounds like book writing has changed how you see books. Has it changed anything else about the world for you? Do you feel like you can do a thing in a book that you couldn't do through other modalities like talks or course teaching or just one-on-one interactions with people?
I think it is reminding me, I think there can be a temptation to think that, physical media like books are outdated, or there's the next best thing, right? With, oh, the ebook must be better because it has more features. And I think it is more so, it's just reinforcing to me that there is a kind of an elegance and a calmness of something fixed, like a book or even a static graphic, that I really appreciate and that I hope we continue to appreciate as its own thing. And that it doesn't have to be, it's not simply less featureful, but that constraint does force you to be just more concise and, yeah, purposeful with what you're doing. You kind of can't cheat in some ways that you can in other media. And
Yeah.
that is very scary in some ways, but then also I think it's healthy, the healthy thing. They're like, we have to commit to this and we have to be really careful about it, because we can't edit once it's live.
You
And
can
you can
keep
do things.
editing the ebook, but not the physical thing. Yeah.
Exactly,
Yeah, you can
exactly.
annotate. And books can have these nice little Easter eggs. One of the things I like about yours is how
Ah,
there
yes.
are these little graphics that distinguish the chapters. And it's, these
Yes,
are these little lagniappes you can do in a book format that it's not the same
totally.
as an ebook. You don't have that flipping through feeling.
Totally, totally. I think there was maybe a little bit of a movement back to analog materials too. And we're in kind of sweet spot where, sure, we could do something in a different format, but we're choosing to do things in the physical way because of what it actually allows you to do that the other formats simply don't, right? Like, I wanted wide margins exactly so that people could write in them if they wanted. I don't like to
Yeah.
write in books personally, but if someone does, that's great, right? This is what's theirs to use, right? It is no longer mine when they own it. If someone wants to scribble in the margins and draw the pictures, and I made the exercises, any tables that you need to fill in information, I'm trying to find one, are very carefully double spaced so that there's room to write in there. And you
Right.
just kind of can't do that when you're glued to a screen.
Well, Nancy, I think that is time to wrap up the conversation. That has been great.
Okay.
I have just a
Thank you
quick
so much.
question for
Sure.
you, just to
Yeah.
finish this conversation of ours. What advice would you have for future authors, someone who is interested in
Mm,
doing a book about their own
in book.
idea? What would be the sort of like the single most important thing to consider before you begin writing a book?
Yes. Okay, can I cheat? It's two things. I've thought
Yep.
about this. The first one is, oh, I get balloons.
Where
um,
where do those
Balloons.
balloons come
I don't
from?
know. I don't know
A
where they
gesture. Who knows which
some
one?
gesture. But it's two things worth balloons. The first one is, do write an outline, write an annotated outline. So not only what's, chapter 1 through 20, but then the tagline of what you want to accomplish in that chapter, what you want the reader to take away, because you just a sea of white blank pages for months at a time is a desolate place, and you will get lost in the salt flats without it. So write the outline, and that is the guiding light throughout. Sure, it's mutable. You can change it. We added a chapter, we rearranged some things, but having that intention and goal set out from the front, I think, cannot be overstated. And it takes like 2 days, right? Given the length of the project, time well spent. So that's the first one, annotate an outline. And the second one really is just like Tamara said, there's the first 90%, second 90%. However you want to say it, this is an endurance sport. Keep going. Because if you spend 5 minutes on it today and that's all you had, you have no more gas in the tank, you're busy with work and life and whatever. The 5 minutes you spend today is 5 minutes that you don't need to spend on it for the rest of the project. Those are done. So every bit contributes. Keep going, keep going, keep going. It will end. It will miraculously end.
All
Yep.
right. And on that note, I think we draw this conclusion to an end. And thank you so
Wonderful.
much. And congratulations.
Thank
Congratulations
you.
again.
And to you too. And thank you. Really, that's a kind of insufficient phrase for how much you contributed, but thank you. And
Thank you
any
for
other
writing a
translation of that
fabulous
works
book.
better, that too. Yeah.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.